Yep.
Anyway, they did exactly what I said they would do. So. Again, fraud. No, you didn't. No, you're not. And yes, I am placing you under arrest. Chapter 25, A Competitive Examination. When the king traveled for change of air, or made a progress, or visited a distant noble whom he wished to bankrupt with the cost of his keep, part of the administration moved with him. It was a fashion of the time. The commission charged with the examination of candidates for posts in the army came with the king to the valley, whereas they could have transacted their business just as well at home. And although this expedition was strictly a holiday excursion for the king, he kept some of his business functions going just the same. He touched for the evil as usual. He held court in the gate at sunrise and tried cases, for he was himself chief justice of the king's bench. He shone very well in this latter office. He was a wise and humane judge, and he clearly did his honest best and fairest, according to his lights. That is a large reservation. His lights, I mean his rearing, often colored his decisions. Whenever there was a dispute between a noble or a gentleman and a person of lower degree, the king's leanings and sympathies were of the former classes anyways, whether he suspected it or not. It was impossible that this should be otherwise. Here, I'll go ahead and... It was impossible that this should be otherwise. The blunting effects of slavery upon the slaveholders' moral perceptions are known and conceded the world over. And a privileged class, an aristocracy, is but a band of slaveholders under another name. This has a harsh sound, and yet should not be offensive to any, even to the noble himself, unless the fact itself be an offense. For the statement simply formulates a fact. The repulsive feature of slavery is the thing, not its name. One needs but to hear an aristocrat speak of the classes that are below him to recognize, and but indifferently modified measure, the very air and tone of the actual slaveholder. And behind these are the slaveholder's spirit, the slaveholder's blunted feeling. They are the result of the same cause to both cases, the possessor's old and inbred custom of regarding himself as a superior being. The king's judgments wrought frequent injustices, but it was merely the fault of his training, his natural and unalterable sympathies. He was as unfitted for a judgeship as would be the average mother for the position of milk distributor to starving children in famine time. Her own children would fare a shade better than the rest. Kind of like how you make me wait at the bank. Ooh, you're in deep shit. One very curious case came before the king. A young girl, an orphan, who had a considerable estate, married a fine young fellow who had nothing. The girl's property was within a seigneury, held the church. I'm not interested. The bishop of the diocese, an arrogant scion of the great nobility, claimed the girl's estate on the ground that she had married privately, and thus had cheated the church out of one of its rights as lord of the seigneury. 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 The one heretofore referred to as le troit du seigneur. Seigneur. The penalty of refusal or avoidance was confiscation. The girl's defense was that the lordship of the seigneury was vested in the bishop, and that the particular right here involved was not transferable, but must be exercised by the lord himself or stand vacated, and that an older law of the church itself strictly barred the bishop from exercising it. It was a very odd case indeed. It's really not an odd case. It reminded me of something I had read in my youth about the ingenious way in which the aldermen of London raised the money that built the mansion house. A person who had not taken the sacrament according to the Anglican rite could not stand as a candidate to sheriff of London. Thus dissenters were ineligible. They could not run if asked. They could not serve if elected. The aldermen, who without any question were Yankees in disguise, hit upon this neat device. They passed a bylaw imposing a fine of £400 upon anyone who would refuse to be a candidate for sheriff, and a fine of £600 upon any person who, after being elected sheriff, refused to serve. Then they went to work and elected a lot of dissenters. one after another, and kept it up until they had collected £15,000 in fines. And there stands the stately mansion house to this day, to keep the blushing citizen in mind of a long past and lamented day when a band of Yankees slipped into London and played games of the sort that has given their race a unique and shady reputation among all truly good and holy peoples that be in the earth. The girl's case seemed strong to me. The bishop's case was just as strong. I did not say how the king was going to get out of this hole, but he got out. I appened his decision. Truly, I find small difficulty here, the matter being even a child's affair for simpleness. And the young bride had conveyed notice, as in duty bound, to her feudal lord and proper master and protector of the bishop, or not. She had suffered no loss, for the said bishop could not have get dispensation making him, for temporary conveniency, eligible to the exercise of his said right, and thus would she have kept all she had. Whereas, failing in her first duty, she hath by that failure failed in all. For whoso, clinging to a rope, severeth it above his hands, must fall. It being no defence to claim that the rest of the rope is sound, neither any deliverance from his peril, as he shall find. Pardy, the woman's case is rotten at the source. It is the decree of the court that she forfeit to the said Lord Bishop all her goods, Clayton Dale Smith, even to the last farthing that she doth possess, and be thereto mulcted in the costs. Next. Who is she? She show? Can she show her face? Here was a tragic end to a beautiful honeymoon, that's for 3 months old. Poor young creatures, they had lived these 3 months lapped to the lips in worldly comforts. These clothes and trinkets they were wearing were as fine and dainty as the shrewdest stretch of the sultry laws allowed to people of their degree. And in these pretty clothes, she crying on his shoulder, and he trying to comfort her with hopeful words set to the music of despair. They went from the judgment seat out into the world, homeless, bedless, breadless. Why, the very beggars by the roadsides were not so poor as they. Well, the king was out of the hole, and on terms satisfactory to the church and the rest of the aristocracy, no doubt. Men write many fine and plausible arguments in support of monarchy, but the fact remained that every man in a state has a vote. Brutal laws are impossible. Arthur's people were of course poor material for a republic because they had been despaced so long by monarchy, and yet even they would have been intelligent enough to make short work of that law which the king had just been administering if it had been submitted to their full and free vote. There is a phrase which has grown so common in the world's mouth that it has come to seem to have sense and meaning. The sense and meaning implied when it is used, that is the phrase which refers to this or that or the other nation as possible being capable of self-government. And the implied sense of it is that there has been a nation somewhere, sometime or other, which wasn't capable of it, wasn't as able to govern itself as some self-appointed specialists were or would be to govern it. The masterminds of all nations, in all ages, have sprung in affluent multitude from the mass of the nation, and from the mass of the nation only, not from its privileged classes. And so no matter what the nation's intellectual grade was, whether high or low, the bulk of its ability was in the long rates of its nameless and its poor. And so it never saw the day that it had not the material in abundance whereby to govern itself, which is to assert on always self-proven fact, that even the best governed and most free and most enlightened monarchy is still behind the best condition attainable by its people, and that the same is true of kindred governments of lower grades, all the way down to the lowest. King Arthur had hurried up the army business altogether beyond my calculations. I had not supposed he would move in the matter while I was away, and so I had not mapped out a scheme for determining the merits of officers. I had only remarked that it would be wise to submit every candidate to a sharp and searching examination, and privately I meant to put together a list of military qualifications that nobody can answer to but my West Pointers. That ought to have been attended to before I left, for the king was so taken with the idea of a standing army that he couldn't wait but must get about it at once, and get up as good a scheme of examination as he could invent out of his own head. I was impatient to see which this was, and to show too how much more admirable was the one which I should display to the examining board. I intimated this gently to the king, and it fired his curiosity. When the board was assembled, I followed him in, and behind us came the candidates. One of these candidates was a bright young West Pointer of mine, and with him were a couple of my West Point professors. When I saw the board, I did not know whether to cry or to laugh. The head of it was the officer known to later centuries as Norroy, King at Arms. The two other members were chiefs of boroughs in his department, and all three were priests, of course. All officials who had to know how to read and write were priests. My candidate was called first out of courtesy to me, and the head of the board opened on him with official solemnity. Name? Malise, son of Webster. Webster. My memory fails to recall the name of the mission. Weaver, God keep us. The king was staggered from his summit to his foundations. One clerk fainted and the others came near him. The chairman pulled himself together and said indignantly, "It is sufficient. Get you hence." But I appealed to the king. I begged that my candidate might be examined. The king was willing, but the board, who were all well-born folk, implored the king to spare them the indignity of examining the weaver's son. I knew they didn't know enough to examine him anyway, so I joined my prayers to theirs, and the king turned the duty over to my professors. I had a blackboard prepared, and it was but up now, and the circus began. It was beautiful to hear the lad lay out of the science of war, and wallow in the tales of battle and siege of supply, transportation, mining, and counter-mining. Grand tactics, big strategy, and little strategy, signal service, infantry, cavalry, artillery, and all about siege guns, field guns, Gatling guns, rifle guns, smooth bores, muskets, practice, revolver practice, and not the solitary word of it all could these catfish make head or tail of. Do you understand? And it was handsome to see him chalk off mathematical nightmares on the backboard that would stump the angels themselves, and do it like nothing, too. All about eclipses and comets and solstices and constellations and mean time and sidereal time and dinner time and bedtime and every other imaginable thing above the clouds or under them that you could harry or bully rag an enemy with and make him wish he couldn't come. And when the boy made his military salute and stood aside at last, I was proud enough to hug him. And all those other people were so dazed they looked partly petrified, partly drunk, and wholly caught out at the snow diver. I judged that the cake was ours, and by a large majority. Education is a great thing. This was the same youth who had come to West Point so ignorant that when I asked him if a general officer should have a horse shot under him on the field of battle, what ought he do? Answered up naively and said, "Get up and brush himself." One of the young nobles was called up now. I thought I would question him a little myself. I said, "I would get behind the horse if you're in the middle of battle. The horse is dead on the ground, and use it as cover until further notice. You're dead." Can your lordship read? His face flushed indignantly, and he fired into me. "Takest me for a clerk? I trow I am not a bloodbat. Answer the question." He crowded his wrath down and made it out to answer, "No." "Can you write?" He wanted to resent this too, but I said, "You will confine yourself to the questions, and make no comments. You are not here to air your blood or your graces, and nothing of the sort will be permitted. Can you write?" "No." "Do you know the multiplication table?" I would not what he referred to. "How much is 9 times 6? 54? It is a mystery that is hidden from me by reason that the emergency required the fathoming of it has not in my life days occurred. It has been a while, and so not having no need to know this thing, I abide barren of the knowledge. If a trade a barrel of onions, 2 are worth 2 pence the bushel, in exchange for a sheep worth 4 pence and a dog worth a penny, and C killed the dog before delivery, because bitten by the same, who mistook him for D, what sum is still due A from B, and which party pays for the dog, C or D, and who gets the money? If A is the penny sufficient, or may he claim consequential damages in the form of additional monies, represents a possible profit which might have entered from the dog, and classifiable as earnest increment, what is to say, insufferent. Verily, in the all-wise and unknowable providence of God, who moveth in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform, have I never heard this fellow to the question for confusion of the mind and congestion of the ducts of thought. Wherefore I beseech you, let the dog and the onions and these people of the strange and godless names work out their several salvations from their piteous and wonderful difficulties without help of mine. For indeed their trouble is sufficient as it is, whereas in I tried to help I should put damage their cause more, and yet mayhap not live myself to see the desolation wrought. What do you know of the laws of attraction and gravitation? If there be such, mayhap this grace the king did promulgate them whilst that I lay sick about the beginning of the year, and thereby failed to hear his proclamation. What do you know of the science of optics? I know of governors of places, and seneschals of castles, and sheriffs of counties, and many like small offices, and titles of honor. But him you call the science of optics I have not heard of before. Peradventure it is new dignity. Oh, he has it on camera, does he? Yes, in this country. Oh, man, the gravity. I can feel it. Why should I feel that? In the lung there, Mark. Can you explain that? Why do I feel that in the lung? Someone's crying. Dry heaving. Why do I feel that? Try to conceive all this mollusk gravely applying for an official position of any kind under the sun. Why, he had all the earmarks of a typewriter copyist, if you leave out the disposition to contribute uninvited emendations of your grammar and punctuation. It was unaccountable that he didn't attempt a little help of that sort out of his majestic supply of incapacity for the job. But that didn't prove that he hadn't material in him for the disposition. It only proved that he wasn't a typewriter copyist yet. After nagging him a little more, I let the professors loose on him, and they turned him inside out, on the line of scientific war, and found him empty of course. Every click is being recorded, thank you. He knew somewhat about the warfare of the time. Bushwhacking around the ogres, and bullfights, and the tournament ring and such things. But otherwise he was empty and useless. Then we took the other young noble in hand, and he was the first one's twin. For ignorance and incapacity, I delivered them into the hands of the chairman of the board with the comfortable consciousness that their cake was dough. They were examined in the previous order of precedence. Name, so please you. Pertipole, son of Sir Pertipole, Baron of Barley Marsh. Grandfather? Also Sir Pertipole, Baron of Barley Marsh. Great-grandfather. The same name and title. Great-great-grandfather. We had none, worshipful sir, the line falling before it had reached so far back. It mattereth not, it is good 4 generations, and fulfill... That doesn't make sense. It mattereth not, it is good 4 generations, and fulfilleth the requirements of the rule. Fulfills what rule, I asked. The rule requiring 4 generations of nobility, or else the candidate is not eligible. A man not eligible for the lieutenancy in the army unless he can prove 4 generations of noble descent. Even so, neither lieutenant nor any other officer may be commissioned without that qualification. Oh, come, this is an astonishing thing. What good is such a qualification as that? What good? It is a hardy question, fair sir and boss, since it doth go far to impugn the wisdom of even our holy Mother Church herself. As how? For that she hath established the self-same rule regarding saints. By her law none may be canonized until he hath lain dead 4 generations. I see. It is the same thing. It is wonderful. In the one case, a man lies dead alive 4 generations, mummified in ignorance and sloth, and that qualifies him in command alive people, and take their weal and woe into his impotent hands. And in the other case, a man lies bedded with death and worms 4 generations, and that qualifies him for office in the celestial camp. Does the king's grace approve of the strange law? It's odd. Are you sure that's natural? The king said, Why, truly, I see not about it that is strange. All places of honor and of profit do belong, by natural right, to them that be of noble blood, and so these dignities in the army are their property, and would be so without this or any rule. The rule is but to mark a limit. Its purpose is to keep out too recent blood, which would bring into contempt these offices, and men of lofty lineage would turn their backs and scorn to take them. I were to blame, and I permitted this calamity. You can permit it, and you are minded so to do. For you have the delegated authority, but the king should do it were a most strange managed, and not comprehensible to any. I yield. Proceed. Sir Chief of the Herald's College. The chairman resumed as...
Lost the lead. Enemy there.
All the principalities, you gotta look out for him, bro. He tried talking shit on him. So we're at 26, the first newspaper. Yes, sir. When I told the king I was going out disguised as a petty freeman to scour the country and familiarize myself with the humbler life of the people, he was all afire with the novelty of the thing in a minute, and was bound to take a chance and adventure himself. Nothing should stop him. He would drop everything and go along. It was the prettiest idea he had run across for many a day. He wanted to glide out the back way and start at once, but I showed him that that wouldn't answer. You see, he was billed for the king's evil to touch for it. And it wouldn't be right to disappoint the house, and it wouldn't make a delay worth considering anyway. It was only a one-night stand, and I thought he ought to tell the queen he was going away. He clouded up at that and looked sad. I was sorry I had spoken, especially when he said mournfully, "Thou forgettest that Lancelot is here, and where Lancelot is, she noteth not the going forth of the king, nor what day he returneth." Of course, I changed the subject. Yes, Jennifer was beautiful, it is true, but take her all around, she was pretty slack. I never meddled in these matters. They weren't my affair, but I did hate to see the way things were going on, and I don't mind saying that. Many's the time she had asked me, "Sir Boss, hast seen Sir Lancelot about?" But if ever she went fretting around for the king, I didn't happen to be around at the time. There was a very good layout for the king's evil business, very tidy and credible. The king sat under a canopy of state. About him were clustered a large body of the clergy in full canonicals. Conspicuous both for location and personal outfit stood Marinal, hermit of the quake doctor species, to introduce the sick. All abroad over the spacious floor, and clear down to the doors, a thick jumble lay or sat the scrofulous under a strong light. It was as good as a tableau. In fact, it had all the look of being gotten up for that, though it wasn't. There were 800 sick people present. The work was slow. It lacked the interest of novelty for me, because I had seen the ceremonies before. The thing soon became tedious, but the properties required me to stick it out. The doctor was there for the reason that in all such crowds there was many people who would only imagine something was the matter with them, and many who were consciously sound but wanted the immortal honor of fleshly contact with the king, and yet others who pretended to illness in order to get the piece of coin that went with the judge. Up to this time, this coin had been a wee little gold piece, worth about $1/3. When you consider how much that amount of money would buy in that ancient country, and how usual it was to be scrofulous, when not dead, you would understand that the annual king's evil appropriation was just the river and harbor bill of that government for the grip it took on the treasury and the chance it afforded for skinning the surplus. So I had privately concluded to touch the treasury itself for the king's evil. I covered 6/7 of the appropriation of the treasury a week before starting from Camelot on my adventures, and ordered that the other 7ths be inflated into 5 nickels and delivered into the hand of the head clerk of the king's evil department. A nickel to take the class of each gold coin, you see, and do its work for it. It might strain the nickel some, but I judged it could stand it. As a rule, I do not approve of watering stock, but I considered it square enough in that case, for it was just a gift. Anyway, of course, you can water a gift as much as you want to, and I generally do. The old gold and silver coins of the country were of ancient and unknown origin, as a rule, but some of them were Roman. They were ill-shapen and seldom rounder than a moon that is weak past the full. They were hammered, not minted, and they were so worn with use that the devices upon them were as ill-eligible as blisters, and looked like them. I judged that a sharp, bright new nickel with a first-rate likeness of the king on one side of it and Jennifer on the other, and a bloomin' pious motto, would take the tuck out of a scrofula as handy as a nobler coin and please the scrofula's fancy more, and I was right. This batch was the first it was tried on, and it worked to a charm. The saving in expense was a notable economy. You will see that by these figures. We touched a trifle over 700 of the 800 patients. At former rates, this would have cost the government about $240. At the new rate, we pulled through for about $35, thus saving upward of $200 at one swoop. To appreciate the full magnitude of this stroke, consider these other fatigues. The annual expenses of a national government amount to the equivalent of a contribution of 3 days' average wages of every individual of the population, counting every individual as if he were a man. If you take a nation of 60 million, where average wages are $2 per day, 3 days' wages taken from each individual will provide 360 million. And pay the government's expenses. In my day, in my own country, this money was collected from imposts, and the citizens imagined that the foreign importer paid it, and it made him comfortable to think so. Whereas, in fact, it was paid by the American people and was so equally and exactly distributed among them that the annual cost to the 100 millionaire and the annual cost to the sucking child of the day laborer was precisely the same. Each paid $6. Nothing could be equaler than that, I reckon. Well, Scotland and Ireland were tributary to Arthur, and the united population of the British Islands amounted to something less than 1 million. A mechanic's average wage was 3 cents a day when he paid his own keep. By this rule, the national government's expenses were $90,000 a year, or about $250 a day. Thus, by the substitution of nickels for gold on a king's evil day, I not only injured no one, dissatisfied no one, but pleased all concerned, and saved 4/5 of that day's national expense into the bargain, a saving which would have been the equivalent of $800,000 in my day in America. In making this substitution, I had drawn upon the wisdom of a very remote source, the wisdom of my boyhood, for the true statesman does not despise any wisdom, howsoever lowly may be its origin. In my boyhood, I had always saved my pennies and contributed buttons to the foreign missionary cause. The buttons would answer the ignorant savage as well as the coin. The coin would answer me better than the buttons. All hands were happy and nobody hurt. Marinell took the patients as they came. He examined the candidate. If he couldn't qualify, he was warned off. If he could, he was passed along to the king. A priest pronounced the words, "They shall lay their hands on the sick, and they shall recover." Then the king stroked the ulcers while the reading continued. Finally, the patient graduated and got his nickel, the king hanging it around the neck himself, and was dismissed. Would you think that that would cure? It certainly did. Any mummery would cure if the patient's faith is strong in it. Up by Astalot there was a chapel where the Virgin had once appeared to a girl who used to herd geese around there. The girl said to herself, and they built the chapel upon the spot and hung a picture in its representing the occurrence, a picture which you would think it dangerous for a sick person to approach. Whereas, on the contrary, thousands of the lame and the sick came and prayed before it every year and went away whole and sound, and even the well could not look upon it and live. Of course, when I was told these things, I did not believe them, but when I went there and saw them, I had to succumb. I had the cures effected myself, and they were real cures, and not questionable. I saw cripples, whom I had seen around Camelot for years on crutches, arrive and pray before that picture, and put down their crutches and walk off without a limp. There were piles of crutches there which had been left by such people as a testimony. In other places, people operated on a patient's mind without saying a word to him and cured him. In others, experts assembled patients in a room and prayed over them and appealed to their faith, and those patients went away cured. Wherever you find a king who can't cure the king's evil, you can't be sure that the most valuable superstition that supports his throne, the subject's belief in the divine appointment of his sovereign, has passed away. In my youth, the monarchs of someone just got hit with my heart. In my youth, the monarchs of England had ceased to touch for the evil, but there was no occasion for this diffidence. They could have cured it 49 times in 50. Well, when the priest had been droning for 3 hours, and the good king polishing over the evidences, and the sick were still pressing forward as plenty as ever, I got to feeling intolerably bored. I was sitting by an open window not far from the canopy of state. For the 500th time a patient stood forward to have his repulsiveness stroked. Again those words were being droned out. They shall lay their hands on the sick. When outside there rang, clear as a clarion, a note that enchanted my soul and tumbled 13 worthless centuries about my ears. Get off. Camelot Weekly, Hazana, and Literary Volcano. Latest eruption and only 2 cents. All about big miracle in the Valley of Holiness. One greater than kings had arrived. The newsboy. But I was the only person in all the throng who knew the meaning of the mighty birth, and what this imperial magician was come into the world to do. I dropped a nickel out of the window and got my paper. An Adam newsboy of the world went around the corner to get my change. Is around the corner yet. It was delicious to see a newspaper again. Yet I was conscious of a secret shock. When my eye fell upon the first batch of display headlines, I had lived in a clammy atmosphere of reverence, respect, deference, so long that my scent a quivery little cold wave through me. High times in the Valley of Holiness. The water more squirt. Burr Merlin works his arts but gets left. But the boss scores in the first innings. The miraculous, well uncorked amid awful outburst of infernal fire and smoke and thunder. The buzzard roosts astonished, unparalleled rejoicings. And so on and so on. Yes, it was too loud. Once I could have enjoyed it and seen nothing out of the way about it, but now its note was discordant. It was good Arkansas journalism, but was not Arkansas. Moreover, the next to the last line was calculated to give offense to the hermits, and perhaps lose us their advertising. Indeed, there was too lightsome tone of flippancy all through the paper. It was plain I had undergone a considerable change without noticing it. I found myself unpleasantly affected by pert little irreverencies, which should have seemed but proper and airy graces of speech at an early period of my life. There was an abundance of the following breathing items that made discomfort. Local smoke and cinders. Sir Lancelot met up with the old king Grievance of Ireland unexpectedly last week over the moor, south Sir Balmore, Merveilleuse, Hog Dasher. The widow has been notified. Expedition number 3 will start a doubt the 1st of on a search for Sir Sangramore and Lais is desirous. It is in command of the renowned Knight of the Red Lawn, Sir Persist of Indy, who is competent, intelligent, courteous, and in every way a maverick, and further assisted by Sir Palomides, the Saracen, who is no huckleberry himself. This is no picnic. These boys mean business. The readers of the Hazana will regret to learn that the handsome and popular Sir Charolais of Gaul, who during his 4-week stay at the Bull and Halibut, the city has won every heart by his polished manner and elegant conversation, will pull out today for home and give us another call, Charlie. The business end of the funeral of the late Sir Dalliance, the Duke's son of Cornwall, killed in an encounter with the giant of the knotted bludgeon last Tuesday on the borders of the plain of enchantment, was in the hands of the ever-available and efficient Mumble, Prince of Undertakers, than whom there exists none by whom it were a more satisfying pleasure to have the last sad offices performed. Give him a trial. The cordial thanks of the Hazana office are due, from editor down to devil, to the ever-courteous and thoughtful Lord High Stew, D. of the Palace's third assistant, V. T. for several saucettes of ice cream, a quality calculated to make the eye of the recipient humid with gratitude, and it done it. When this administration wants to chalk up a desirable name for early promotion, the Hazana would like a chance to suggest it. The Demoiselle Irene Dulap of South Astolat is visiting her uncle, the popular host of the Calamus boarding, hoe and sea, livered land. This city Young Barker, the bellows mender, is home again and looks much improved by his vacation roundup among the outlying smithies. See his ad. Of course it was good enough journalism for a beginning. I knew that quite well, and yet it was somehow disappointing. The court circular pleased me better. Indeed, its simple and dignified respectfulness was a distinct refreshment to me after all those disgraceful familiarities. But even it could have been improved. Do what one may, there is no getting an air of verity into a court circular. I acknowledge that. There is profound monotonousness about its facts that baffles and defeats one's sincerest efforts to make them sparkle and enthuse. The best way to manage, in fact, the only sensible way, is to disguise repetitiously a fact under a variety of form. Skin your fact each time and lay on a new cuticle of words. It deceives the eye. You think it is a new fact. It gives you the idea that the court is carrying on like everything. This excites you, and you drain the whole column with a good appetite and perhaps never notice that it's a barrel of soup made out of a single bean. Clarence's way was good. It was simple, it was dignified, it was direct and businesslike. All I say, it was not the best way. Court circular. Days of the week. However, take the paper by and large, I was vastly pleased with it. Little crudities of a mechanical sort were observable here and there, but there was not enough of them to amount to anything, and it was good enough Arkansas proofreading, anyhow, and better than was needed in Arthur Day and Realm. As a rule, the grammar was leaky and the construction more or less lame, but I didn't much mind these things. They are common defects of my own, and one mustn't criticize other people on grounds where he can't stand perpendicular himself. I was hungry enough for literature to want to take down the whole paper at this one meal, but I only got a few bites, and then had to postpone because the notes around me besieged me so with eager questions. What is the curious thing? What is it for? The frog? I wonder if you can hear that. Is it a handkerchief? Saddle blanket, part of a shirt. What is it made of? How thin is it? And how many dainty and frail, and how it rattles? Will it wear? Do you think it won't? The rain injure it? Is it writing that appears on it, or is it only ornamentation? They suspected it was writing because those about them who knew how to read Latin and had a smattering of Greek recognized some of the letters, but they could make nothing out of the result as a whole. I put my information in the simplest form I could. It's a public journal. I will explain what that is another time. It is not cloth. It is made of paper. Sometime I will explain what paper is. The lines on it are reading matter, and not written by hand, but printed. By and by I will explain what printed is. 1,000 of these sheets have been made, all exactly like this in every minute detail. They can't be told apart. Then they all broke out with exclamations of surprise and admiration. 1,000! Verily a mighty work, a year's work for many men. No, merely a day's work for a man and a boy. They crossed themselves and whiffed out a protective prayer or two. Ah, miracle of wonder, there's more than one. How now? Dark work of enchantment, I let it go at that. Then I read in a low voice, to as many as could crowd their shaven heads, with hearing distant part of the account of the miracle of the restoration of the well, and was accompanied by astonished and reverent ejaculations all through. Ah, how true! Amazing, amazing! These be very haps as they happen in marvelous exactness. And might they take this strange thing in their hands and feel of it and examine it? They would be very careful. Yes, so they took it, handling it as cautiously and devoutly as if it had been home, as it had been some holy thing, come from some supernatural region, and gently felt of its texture, caressed its pleasant smooth surface and lingering touch, and scanned the mysterious characters with fascinating eyes. These group-bent heads, these charmed faces, these speaking eyes, how beautiful to me! For was not this my darling, and was not all this mute wonder and interest and homage a most eloquent tribute and unforced compliment to it? I knew, then, how a mother feels when women, whether strangers or friends, take her new baby, and how close themselves about it with one eager impulse, and bend their heads over it in a tranced adoration that makes all the rest of the universe vanish out of their consciousness, and be as if it were not, for that time. I knew how she feels, and that there is no other satisfied ambition, whether of king, conqueror, or poet, that ever reaches halfway to that serene far summit, or yields half so divine a contentment. During all the rest of the seance, my paper traveled from group to group all up and down and about the huge hall, and my happy eye was upon it always, and I sat motionless, steeped in satisfaction, drunk with enjoyment. Yes, this was heaven. I was tasting it at once, if I might never taste it more. Go to a different video here for the hair. I'm not sure. I definitely need some hair work done though. Again though, look. It looks like someone's drawing patterns in it. 27. I said it, not you, so. The Yankee and the King travel incognito. About bedtime, I took the King to my private quarters to cut his hair and help him get the hang of the lowly raiment he was to wear. The high classes wore their hair banged across the forehead but hanging to the shoulders the rest of the way around, whereas the lowest ranks of commoners were banged fore and aft both. The slaves were bangless and allowed their hair free growth, so I inverted a bowl over his head and cut away all the locks that hung below it. I also trimmed his whiskers and mustache until they were only about a half-inch long, and tried to do it inartistically and succeeded. It was a villainous disfigurement. When he got his lubberly sandals on, and his long robe of coarse brown linen cloth, which hung straight from his neck to his ankle bones, he was no longer the comeliest man in his kingdom, but one of the unhandsomest and most commonplace and unattractive. We were dressed and barber-like alike, and could pass for small farmers, or farm bailiffs, or shepherds, or carters, yes, or for village artisans, if we choose our costume being in effect universal among the poor because of its strength and cheapness. I don't mean that it was really cheap to a very poor person, but I do mean that it was the cheapest material there was for male attire, manufactured material, you understand. No, well, he's showing its brightness is what he's doing. I can tell whenever I take a shower. They're shining a different, an underlaying, technically it would be combustion. That's what, in the theory of relativity, we were talking about the glass. So they're basically shining the red light through the tower, and you also have the white light. So the white light would be separate from the sun. They're different shades, but they're the same, type of thing. So what he's doing is gripping onto the window here and then gripping my head. So like any kind of smell would be radiation. Like heat signature, you know what I mean? So that ties into it as well. Again, it all started when I got the PS4. A lot of things happened all at once, I'll be honest. We slipped away an hour before dawn, and by broad sunup had made 8 or 10 miles, and were in the midst of a sparsely settled country. I had a pretty heavy knapsack. It was laden with provision for the King to taper down on, till he could take the course fare of the country without damage. Nah, I'm pretty sure you're using the fan. So what you're doing is you're gripping on the nasal. Dude, you're dealing with bells all around. In different forms. That includes the fan. So like when I speak at some points, you can tell it's Russian. By the nasal. So you're attaching a dog whistle to the fan. And so since it's constantly running, like I was literally like sitting there. That's when it started though. And no, it's not, because you're making false statements as far as that. We smoked pot. That's not what it is. I could have brushed my, let's see, let's go through the thing. I could have brushed my teeth more, I'll say that. I smoked pot, that's as far as it goes. He tried to move my eyes on it, that's as far as it goes. Anyways, you're drawing patterns. You know what I mean? It's like if you were to take a shower and you were to use Missouri water, and then the next day you were to take a shower and use like Fiji water, your hair would be, you can tell it by your hair. There's a different brightness. It's coming in at a different latitude.
You know what I mean? So that is what's going on here. That's like, you're making it unattractive to go to these positions, but these positions are doing this and that. So it's kind of like, well, here I am. The owner of the property, the legal owner of the property. And I'm pretty sure you have the Ark, whatever it may be, wherever you may be, attached. It's in a bank vault. Every time you go around a bank or you pass a bank, it thumps your heart. I'm pretty sure that's where it is. Yeah, get it out of the vault. It's not yours. I found a comfortable seat for the king by the roadside and then gave him a morsel or two to stay his stomach with. Then I said I would find some water for him and strolled away. Part of my project was to get out of sight and sit down and rest a little myself. It had always been my custom to stand when in his presence, even at the council board, except upon those rare occasions when the sitting was a very long one, extending over hours. Then I had a trifling little backless thing, which was like a reversed culvert, and was as comfortable as the toothache. I didn't want to break him suddenly, but do it by degrees. We should have to sit together now when in company, or people would notice, but it would not be good politics for me to be playing equality with him when there was no necessity for it. I found the water some 300 yards away and had been resting about 20 minutes when I heard voices. That is all right, I thought. Peasants going to work. Nobody else likely to be stirring this early. But the next moment these comers jingled in the sides around a turn of the road. Smartly clad people of quality with luggage mules and servants in their train. I was off like a shot, through the bushes, by the shortest cut. For a while it did seem that these people would pass the king before I could get to him. But desperation gives you wings, you know, and I canted my body forward, inflated my breast and held my breath and flew. I arrived, and in plenty good enough time, too. Pardon, my king, but it's no time for ceremony. Jump. Jump to your feet, some quality are coming. Is that a marvel? Let them come. But, my liege, you must not be seen sitting. Rise, and stand in humble posture while they pass. You're a peasant, you know. True. I had forgot it, so lost was I in planning of a huge war with Gaul. He was up by this time, but a farm could have got up quicker if there was any kind of a boom in real estate. And right so, a thought came ramming over toward this majestic dream, the witch. A humbler attitude, my lord the king, and quick, duck your head. More, still more, droop it. He did his honest best, but lord, it was no great things. He looked as humble as the leaning tower of Pisa. It is the most you could say of it. Indeed, it was such a thundering poor success that it raised wondering scowls all along the line, and a gorgeous flunky at the tail end of it raised his whip. But I jumped in time and was under it with it fell, and under cover of the volley of coarse laughter which followed, I spoke up sharply and warned the king to take no notice. He mastered himself for the moment, but it was a sore task. He wanted to eat up for possession, I said, it would end our adventures at the very start, and we, being without weapons, could do nothing with that armed gang. If we were going to succeed in our emprise, we must not only look the peasant, but act the peasant. It is wisdom, none can gainsay it. Let us go on, Sir Boss. I will take note and learn, and do the best I may. He kept his word. He did the best he could, but I have seen better. If you have ever seen an active, heedless, enterprising child going diligently out of some mischief and into another all day long, and an anxious mother at its heels all the while, and just saving by a hair from drowning herself or breaking his neck with each new experiment, you've seen the king and me. If I could have foreseen what the thing was going to be like, I should have said no. If anybody wants to make his living exhibiting a king as a peasant, let him take the layout. I can do better with a mangerie, and less longer. And yet, during the first 3 days, I never allowed him to enter a hut or other dwelling. If he could pass muster anywhere during his early novitiate, it would be in a small inn and on the road. So to these places we confined ourselves. Yes, he certainly did the best he could, but what of that? He didn't improve a bit that I could see. He was always frightening me, always breaking out with fresh astonishers in new and unexpected places. Toward evening on the second day, what does he do but blandly fetch out a dirk from inside his robe? Great guns, my liege, where did you get that? From a smuggler at the inn, yes, Sir Eve. What in the world possessed you to buy it? We have escaped diverse dangers by wit. Thy wit, but I have bethought me that I were but prudent if I bore a weapon too. Thine might fail thee in some pinch. But people of our condition are not allowed to carry arms. What would a lord say? Yes, or any other person of whatever condition, if he caught an upstart peasant with a dagger on his person? It was a lucky thing for us that nobody came along just then. I persuaded him to throw the dirk away, and it was as easy as persuading a child to give up some bright, fresh, new way of killing itself. We walked along, silent, thinking finally. The king said, When you know that I meditate a thing inconvenient, or that hath peril in it, why did you not warn me to cease from that project? It was a startling question and a puzzler. I didn't quite know how to take hold of it, or what to say, and so of course I ended by saying that natural thing. But sire, how can I know what your thoughts are? The king stopped dead in his tracks and stared at me. I believed thou wert greater than Merlin, and truly in magic thou art. But prophecy is greater than magic. Merlin is a prophet. I saw I had made a blunder. I must get back my lost ground. After a deep reflection, careful planning, I say, Sire, I have been misunderstood. I will explain. There are two kinds of prophecy. One is the gift to foretell things that are but a little way off. The other is the gift to foretell things that are whole ages and centuries away, which is the mightier gift, you think. Oh, the last. Surely. True. Does Merlin possess it? Partly, yes. He foretold mysteries about my birth and future kinship that were 20 years away. Has he ever gone before that? He would not claim more, I think. It is probably his limit. All prophets have their limit. The limit of some of the great prophets has been 100 years. These are a few, I ween. So if you have a debtor giving money out, and there's a man that owes a debt, okay, so
Enemy flag returned.
he owes the debtor a debt. Well, there's another man that owes the first man, not the debtor, a debt of itself. You see? You remember
It's
the story?
unfortunate. Here's where I'm.
You talking about prophecy? So this guy can do this prophecy, and this another one can do this. What's the difference?
Yeah, they ain't listening. That's what you look like.
But what I explained is not prophecy, so that kind of throws that out. It's not prophecy. It'd be like Mercury.
Chilling spine.
We're not doing this.
You have to think like hydrogen.
Enemy flag returned.
Stupid fucker.
Technically, it's not hydrogen until it reaches Earth.
You can come
But I
over.
mean, the beginning stages. You start from Mercury, from what we can see. You know what I mean? You start with Mercury and so on and so forth. It's definitely explainable in all aspects. True, does Merlin possess it? Partly, yes. He foretold mysteries about my birth and future kinship about 20 years away. Has he ever gone beyond that? He would not claim more, I think. It is probably his limit. All prophets have a limit. The limit of some of the great prophets has been 100 years. These are few, I mean. There have been two still greater ones, whose limit was 400 and 600 years, and one whose limit compassed even 720. Gramercy, it is marvelous. But what are these in comparison with me? They are nothing. What? Canst thou truly look beyond even so vast a stretch of time at 700 years? My liege, as clear as the vision of an eagle does my prophetic eye penetrate and lay bare the future of this world for nearly 13 centuries and a half. My land, you should have seen the king's eyes spread slowly open and lift the earth's entire atmosphere as much as an inch. That settled Brer Merlin. One never had any occasion to prove his facts with these people. All he had to do was to state them. It never occurred to anybody to doubt the statement. Now then, I continued, I could work both kinds of prophecy, the
I can
long
feel
and the
the
short,
weight, dude.
if I chose to take
You're a
trouble to keep in
bitch.
practice,
I'll be
but I
honest.
seldom exercise any but the long kinds, because the
You're
others
more.
beneath my
I can
dignity.
feel it in the ribs.
It is proper to Merlin, so
Way to ruin my stream.
stump-tail prophets is what we call them in the
I
profession.
do. I'm not doing
Of
this.
course, I
Nope.
wet up now and then and flirt at a minor prophecy, but not often.
My dude.
Hardly ever,
No,
in fact.
no.
You will remember
You're
that there
not-
was a great talk
You're going to
when you
jail
reached
for
the
it.
Valley
I'm not
Pole
backing off.
about my having prophesied your coming
Here,
in
let
the
me
very
back
hour
off
of
for
your
a second.
arrival,
Here, let me cut
2
you
or
off
3
my
days
stream for a
beforehand.
second because a little bitch.
Indeed,
My dude, I'm not kidding with you at all.